How to break old Kamma's spell, Buddha's way. There's a common expression that you shouldn't believe everything you hear. There should also be another expression that goes along with that. You shouldn't believe everything you think. In other words, just because a thought keeps coming into the mind doesn't mean it's true, doesn't mean you have to believe it. After all kinds of random things can come in. The effect of past Kamma is very evident. You're sitting here determined to stay with the breath, and something else comes into the mind, completely unintended. Well, that's coming from your past Kamma. So when you consider the source, you realize it's not necessarily something you have to believe. The problem is that certain thoughts keep coming in again and again and again. And as advertisers and propagandists have discovered, if you repeat something long enough and often enough, people will start assuming it must be true. Where did they learn that technique? They learned it from the way the mind treats itself. But when you become a meditator, you have to realize that these are things you have to free yourself from. You do that by learning to look at thoughts as processes. That's one way of getting out of their power. So you need the tricks to learn how to deal with them in the same way that people learn the tricks that advertisers and other media specialists know, so that you can gain some freedom from them. You can see, oh, now they're playing that trick. Now they're playing this trick. When you see it as a trick, then you're no longer taken in so easily. So you've got to learn the tricks of the mind or the tricks of thinking so that you don't get taken in, so that you step back and look at the process. When something comes into the mind, say a thought of irritation or a thought of boredom comes in, the first question is, why should I believe this? Second question, what's actually is going on here? What's the process? How did this thought arise? And how does it assume authority? Oppressed by old Kamma. Often a particular thought assumes authority because it gets into the body. You have to realize that each thought that comes into the mind, especially thoughts that come and stay or thoughts that keep coming back repeatedly, have a place in the body where they latch hold. There's usually a pattern of tension that goes along with them someplace. Look for that. When a thought comes up, is it associated with a pattern of tension in your neck, in your back, in your arms, in your hands? What's the quality, the feeling tone that goes along with it? Can you change that feeling tone at will using the breath? Sometimes you change the way you breathe and the thought will go away. And just seeing it as a process like that helps to take away some of its authority and some of your willingness to believe in it, because you see the artificiality of the whole thing. So when thoughts like this come into the mind, if you can't just brush them away immediately, you have to question them. Remind yourself of the disadvantages of following thoughts like that. They pull you away from your concentration. They get in the way of the work you're trying to do here. Here you have a real luxury, hours and hours and hours of time simply to focus on the mind. And what happens? You get bored or oppressed by the idea that you've got to fill up those hours with something. Well, why do you have to fill it up? There's only one little simple task that's being asked of you, which is to stay with the breath, each breath as it happens. This leads to another issue that comes up with many of these thoughts, which is that they start thinking about the past and future. They think about how long you've been sitting here. They think about how much longer you have to sit here. Can you stand it? Can you take it? Well, if you pile the past and the future onto the present moment, of course, you can't take it. The present moment just buckles under the weight of all that time. So when you see that kind of thinking coming in, you have the freedom to let it go. Think of that as a freedom. You have that choice. So many of the habits of the mind are there because we don't realize we have the choice just to say no to them. And this is a case where you really can just say no. After all, who's there to enforce your distracted thinking? Nobody. Nothing. There's nobody behind it. It's simply the force of habit. And you can break the force of habit. Partly, it's a matter of allowing yourself to imagine that you can break that force, and then try it. Part of the mind will say, "Oh no, you can't. Even though you may break it once, I'm going to come back." Okay, you can just break it again and again and again. Don't listen to that voice either. Often when these thoughts come into the mind, there's not just one of them. They're not just one voice. There are subsidiary voices behind them, and you feel overwhelmed by the crowd. All these different voices and just one of you. There are all these many layers. Well, you take them apart, layer by layer by layer, and learn not to be taken in by any of the layers. So when a thought comes in the mind about how oppressive it is to have free time, stop and remind yourself, what's oppressive about free time? You have the choice to stay with the breath. This breath and then the next breath, and that's the only breath you have to worry about. The only piece of time you have to worry about. You don't have to worry about the hours ahead of you or the hours behind you. They'll take care of themselves. All you're responsible for is the breath right now. All you're responsible for is the single thought that comes into the mind right now, the single distraction that comes into the mind right now. In that way, you find it a lot easier to deal with them one by one by one. Sometimes, though, it's not the past or the future that's oppressive, it's the present moment. Well, again, look and see exactly how much of this feeling of oppression or irritation is simply a present sensation and how much of it is the accumulation. This has been going on for so long, so long. You sit here and meditate as a group, and sometimes somebody's breathing is noisy and you tell yourself, how much longer can I take this? Well, you're only asked to take it one moment at a time. As for the past, you let it go away. You don't have to carry it around. As for the future, you don't have to carry that around either. It'll take care of itself. This principle applies not only to minor irritations but also to pain. Often when we have trouble dealing with pain in meditation, it's because we're carrying the past pain and the future pain in addition to the present pain. So you remind yourself, you don't have to carry that. What's past is past. It's gone. It's no longer oppressing you. The fact that it's oppressing you is your choice. You have that choice. The same with the future. You have the choice to think about the future and how much longer it's going to be before the bell rings and you can stop meditating, or you have the choice not to think about it. A little voice in the mind will come up and say, well, that's irresponsible. What's irresponsible about it? Each moment can take care of itself. You can handle each moment as it comes, as it comes, as it comes. You don't have to handle it beforehand. As you build up your skill for dealing precisely and specifically with the present moment, you'll find that each moment does become a lot easier to handle. What this means is that you're learning to see through these voices that come and try to pull you away. If you actually look at them, say, who's there? Who's saying that? Well, there's nobody. Quiet. So if there's nobody there, why do I have to listen to you? You start seeing how irresponsible these voices are. When you try to pin them down, they run away. So why listen to irresponsible voices in your head? These are just a few of the means of dealing with obstructive emotions and voices as they come in. Look at the physical side of whatever thought is coming in and pulling you away from the meditation. Then listen very carefully to the voices themselves. If you look at the physical side, you can just breathe right through it, and that weakens the voices right there. You look at the voice, and you realize there's nobody there. It's just a habit pattern. And no matter how old the habits may be, you can change them simply by refusing to follow them. You've got something a lot better to follow here. The Buddha's instructions on how to bring the mind under your control. Which thoughts are the ones worth following? Which are the ones worth putting aside? You can ask yourself, if you follow those voices, where will they take you? They're certainly not going to take you to the Dhamma. They're certainly not going to take you to the end of suffering. They just keep pulling you into the old patterns you've been following for who knows how long. Is that where you want to go? Sometimes you say yes because it's familiar territory. But then familiar territory is full of what? It's full of suffering, full of disappointment, full of dissatisfaction. The new territory the Buddha is asking you to go to is unfamiliar. But everybody who's been there has said it's the end of suffering. So why don't you give it a try? Instead of giving in to the irritation or giving in to the boredom, just allow those thoughts to cease. Allow them to pass away into the silence. Come back to the breath, or replace them with a better thought, reminding yourself that you've got this opportunity to meditate. You don't know how much longer it's going to be. None of us knows how much longer we're going to be here. But you've got this moment right now. This is something you can be sure about. So focus all of your attention here. Make sure this moment is well handled. As for your ability to handle moments in the future, well, leave that for the future to take care of. If you develop good habits now, you'll make it that much easier to handle things in the future. Don't believe all the pictures your mind paints about what's going to happen in the future. What's future is uncertain, the Buddha said. What's past is gone. All you've got to worry about is the future right here, right here. See this moment clearly. If you can maintain that attitude for this moment and then this moment and this moment, then the Buddha said that's what constitutes an auspicious day. Some things in life you take care of moment by moment by moment. That's all you have to worry about, this moment right here, this moment right here. Then if random thoughts come in, remind yourself that they're the result of past karma. What you're responsible is for your current decision right now. Are you going to follow the thoughts or are you not? Sometimes an old habit comes in and there's a sense of inevitability about it, that no matter how much you're going to fight it, you're going to have to give in eventually because that's been the pattern in the past. Well, at least for this moment, don't believe it. As you build up more and more moments of making this choice, then you realize that those habits are not inevitable. You can change them. As Ajahn Mahabua said, it's better to put up a fight and then lose than to not put up any fight at all. If you keep putting up a fight, after a while, there comes a time when you get tired of losing. At the same time, you begin to see the weaknesses of these habits that you didn't see before. If you simply just roll over with them every time they come in, then of course they're going to seem inevitable. But if you give it a try, you may just find an opening that you hadn't imagined. That's what creates greater freedom in the mind. You're no longer a slave to old thought patterns. You can learn to think in new ways, ways that are helpful. You can start playing with your perceptions of the moment, playing with your perceptions of your distractions. If the sound of somebody breathing is bothering you, well, you can think of it as the sound of an animal. If an animal were breathing that way, would it bother you? No. Well then, what's the difference? Well, an animal can't help itself, but people can help themselves. Well, why does that make any difference to you? It's simply the sound. Leave it just at the sound. By playing with your perceptions, you begin to take apart a lot of the stories you built up around them, that make them oppressive, that make them irritating, whatever. And you begin to expose those stories so that you can see how illogical they are. What this all comes down to is that you have to learn not to be oppressed by old habits in the present moment. Look at each present moment as an opportunity to act, as something that you can learn to deal with skillfully, using your breath as your basis and your ability to ask questions. When the mind says something that you know is going to pull you away from the meditation, and you put a question mark next to it, does it have to be that way? That ability to question things is going to open the possibility for freedom. Old Kamma and new. Ajahn Lee divides concentration practice into 3 factors: the right object, the right intention, and the right quality. The right object here is the breath, or whatever topic you've decided to focus on. You might be repeating the word Buddha, or you might be analyzing the body into elements. You might be analyzing it into its different parts. Whatever the topic you've decided on, try to stick with it. It's the stick-to-it-iveness that makes the difference. Otherwise, it just becomes one more place for you to stop off in your daily rounds. The right intention is your intention to stay here. That's the Kamma in your meditation. We don't usually think about meditation as Kamma, but that's what it is. It's good Kamma. A lot of our connotations around the word Kamma are negative. We think of Kamma only when bad things happen, except for good parking Kamma. But actually, every intention you have is a kind of Kamma, so you try to make it skillful. The skillful intention now is to create a state of concentration in the mind and let go of everything else that comes in. As for the right quality, you want to have a sense of ease and congeniality with your object. When you're working with the breath, remember that it's your friend. If you find yourself fighting with the breath, that's not the right attitude to have. You want the breath to be comfortable because if the mind is going to stay here, having a sense of ease and comfort is really helpful. Even though there may be pains in some parts of the body, there are lots of parts of the body where you can develop a sense of ease and well-being, parts that you can make comfortable just by the way you breathe. So, experiment for a while with the breathing, and remember that the breath is not just the air coming in and out of the lungs. It's also the energy flow throughout the body, and that connects with the in and out breath. So once there's a sense of ease in one spot in the body, see if you can let it flow into other spots. For example, if there's a pain in some part of the body, think of the easeful energy going right through it. If there's a pain in your hip or in your knee, don't let the breathing stop at the hip or at the knee. Think of it going all the way through and out the foot. That loosens up a lot of the tension that tends to develop around pain. So those are the three factors: the right intention, the right object, the right quality. Now you find, particularly on the issue of intention, that other thoughts will come into the mind while you're sitting here, and they'll come unbidden. Think of those as old Kamma. You're not responsible for them right now. In fact, how you deal with them right now is your new Kamma. In this particular case, you want to learn how to say no. Sometimes we get upset. Really strange things come into the mind and we feel bad about it. Just remind yourself, this is past stuff. What you're responsible for right now is what you do with what's coming in. The Buddha said to regard the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the intellect as old Kamma. These are the spheres of sense by which old Kamma is going to come at you. There's not much we can do about it, except that we can change the state of mind in the present moment so that what comes in from the past, if it's negative, doesn't have to have a huge impact on the mind. To do that, the Buddha said to develop the mind in virtue. In other words, learning how to say no to things that you know are unskillful. You also want to develop it in discernment so that you can see where the act of identifying with these things is going to weigh you down, and you also want to see that it's unnecessary. This is where the teachings on inconstancy, stress, and not self are really useful, even as you're just getting started in the practice. Anything that comes up that you know is going to be negative, just say, hey, this is inconstant. It's going to be here for a while and then it's going to go. If you latch on to it, it's going to weigh the mind down. So why do you want to identify with it? You're not required to identify with it. That right there is a huge opening to freedom. We had someone come here the other day who had been molested as a child, and a lot of the memories of that were coming back to him and really weighing him down. I had to remind him, well, that's past Kamma, the fact that these memories are coming back and you're having these reactions to them. That's old Kamma. But what you do with these things, that's your new Kamma, and that's what you're responsible for now. You don't have to carry around your past all the time. So discernment is what allows you to see, okay, this is present Kamma, that's past Kamma. The present Kamma is what matters. The Buddha talks about people coming in dark and going in dark, coming in light and going in light, coming in dark and going in light, or coming in light and going in dark. The coming has to do with your past karma, good or bad. And he says it doesn't matter how you come. What matters is that you're going in light. In other words, you're doing good things right now. After all, we are the owners of our actions, so you just keep pumping good karma into the present moment. That's why we have that reflection before we meditate, to remind ourselves, this is good karma, some of the best good karma there is. 3 other qualities are also good for dealing with old karma. 1 is training yourself not to be easily overcome by pain, learning to see the pain as something separate from your awareness. There will be pains in different parts of the body, of course. It's a natural and normal part of having a body. The potential for pain is always there. As Ajahn Suwat once said, you can take an iron stake and stick it in any part of the body and it's going to be painful. The fact that you've got a body leaves you open to the possibility of pain. So you have to learn how to live with pain and not get pushed around by it. If there's a pain in the knee, you occupy the area around that but not in it. You don't have to go into the pain yet. And as I said earlier, try to make the area on both sides of the pain, both the side that's closer to you and the side that's further away, filled with good breath energy. Keep reminding yourself you don't have to lay claim to the pain. Ajahns in Thailand talk about learning how to separate your awareness out from the pain. You want to see awareness as one thing, pain as something else, the body as something else. The body's just elements. Your sense of the body sitting right here is composed of the 4 properties of earth, water, wind, and fire. Pain is not the same thing as any of those 4 properties. Can you learn to see it that way? Can you learn to unglom the glom? When you can deal with pain in that way, then negative things coming at you in any way are not such a big deal. You learn how to step aside. Another quality that's useful is not being overcome by pleasure. We learn this through the concentration. All too often, you hear that you should avoid the pleasure of concentration because it's really seductive and it's going to get in the way of your insight. But that's not the case. You have to learn some important things about pleasure if you're going to keep the mind well concentrated. And the first thing is that if you drop the breath to go to the pleasure, you're going to ruin the concentration. It'll be nice for a while, it actually may be very pleasant, but it's like trying to sit on a cloud. It's all very fuzzy and there's no real substance there, but if you stay with the breath throughout the body, then even if the breath gets still, you can be with the stillness. If you can see it, the stillness is one thing. The pleasure is something else. You don't go trying to wallow in the pleasure. That's how you train your mind not to be overcome by pleasure. And then finally, the Buddha says to learn how to dwell with an unlimited awareness. This relates to the Brahmaviharas. You want your goodwill to be all around. You want your ability to feel compassion to be all around. You want your ability to feel empathetic joy to be all around. And the same with your equanimity, all around. In other words, you want to be able to tap into these things whenever you need them. In cases where some people are difficult, learn how to have goodwill for them regardless. As for the difficult things they do, learn how to have equanimity about them, regardless. When good things happen to people you don't like, learn how to have equanimity. When bad things happen to people you do like, learn how to have equanimity. Be able to draw on these things whenever you need them, because we live in a world where good things happen to people we like and bad things happen to people we like. Bad things happen to people we don't like, and good things happen to people we don't like. If you don't want your mind to be driven around by those things, you have to learn how to develop equanimity. And if you're going to be dealing with people you like and don't like, you have to have goodwill for them so that you can trust yourself. So these 4 Brahmaviharas are attitudes you want to be able to tap into when you need them, whichever one is appropriate. As the Buddha said, when your mind is like this, it's like a wealthy person. If a wealthy person is charged with a $2 fine, it's no problem at all. But if you can't develop your mind like this, it's like being someone who has only 2 or 3 cents to his name. When the $2 fine is imposed, they're going to throw you in jail because you can't pay it. It's the same way with the Kamma coming in from the past. Bad stuff comes in from the past. If you've got this expansive mind state, it'll hardly make a ripple. If the mind is narrow, lacks discernment, lacks virtue, is easily overcome by pleasure or pain, and is very narrow in its likes and dislikes, letting its likes and dislikes take it over, that same bad Kamma is going to drive you around. In other words, it's going to push you in a direction where you're going to be making more bad Kamma in the present moment. So when you have this expansive attitude of wealth in your meditation, then when bad Kamma comes, you can just let it drop at your feet. It's like those arrows that they say that Mara shot at the Buddha prior to his awakening. They never even came close to the Buddha. They fell to the ground and turned into flowers. In your case, the bad Kamma may not turn into flowers, but at least the arrows don't hit you. You're not making yourself a target. You don't pick up the arrows and stab yourself with them. That's the important thing. So as you're sitting here and things come up in the meditation, say, well, that's just old Kamma. Plunk. Just let it fall on the ground. Even if it's a shower of arrows, let them all fall on the ground. You've got your intention here in the present moment to stay with the breath, to develop these factors, the right object, the right intention, and the right quality. That's your refuge right here. That's what repels the arrows. So always keep this distinction between new Kamma and old Kamma in mind, because it makes a huge difference in how you deal with things coming up in the mind. We talk about the committee of the mind. Well, a lot of the members of the committee are just old Kamma. You want your skillful new Kamma to be the chairman of the meeting, who can decide who's speaking out of order and who has the right and who doesn't have the right to vote on what you're going to be doing right now. As long as mindfulness, alertness, and ardency can play the role of chairman, then no matter what comes in, it doesn't have to hit you, and you don't have to pick it up. It doesn't have to drive you around. You're in charge. The limits of old Kamma. Focus your attention on the breath and see how it feels. Where do you notice it in the body first? Where does it seem most prominent? You might notice the passage of the air through the nostrils, the rise and fall of the chest, the expansion of the rib cage. There are lots of different places in the body where you can sense the movement of the breath. Whichever area seems most prominent, focus there. And notice if the breath feels comfortable there. If it doesn't, you can let it change. Let it be longer or shorter, or think of it as becoming longer or shorter. You don't have to make it be that way or force it to be that way. Just pose that thought in mind. What would longer breathing be like? And you'll find the body will breathe longer. What would shorter breathing be like? Heavier, lighter, faster, slower? Explore the possibilities of the breath right now. Think of the breathing as a whole body process and see what that does to your sense of what kind of breathing feels best or what the body needs in terms of the breath. Sometimes it needs to be energized, sometimes relaxed. Get a sense of the breath potentials right now. We're sitting here with lots of different potentials in the body, potentials in the mind. As we meditate, we explore to see which potentials lead to the greatest happiness, the greatest pleasure. Allow the breath to be pleasurable, and also notice what your mind is doing, what potentials you have in your mind. What thoughts could you be thinking right now? What qualities could you develop? At the moment, we're trying to emphasize the thoughts that focus you on the breath in the present moment. And we're trying to be inquisitive, trying to learn about the breath. Those two factors, thinking of the breath or focusing on the breath and being inquisitive, count as directed thought and evaluation, two of the factors of jhana. Use them to see how you can stay with the breath in a way that feels comfortable, giving rise to feelings of refreshment and pleasure. And as you probe and explore, you begin to realize that there is this potential right here for the body to feel comfortable from the inside, for the mind to be willing to settle down. There are lots of other potentials you could have focused on right now, but you don't have to. Make the most of your freedom to focus on your ability to expand skillful potentials. Occasionally, you'll find yourself running up against some blockages or pains that, no matter how skillfully you breathe, are going to stay as pains. Or there may be some chatter away in the mind that won't go away. You don't have to focus on it. Just let it be there in the background. But it does impinge a little bit on your awareness. In other words, you find yourself running up against old karma obstructions. Fortunately, though, the present moment is not totally shaped by old karma. If it were, there'd be no point in practicing. There'd be nothing you could do. Everything would be determined by something that went before, which of course would have been determined by something that went before that and on back in an infinite regress. This is why the Buddha rejected the idea that everything was determined by a creator or everything was determined by old karma. Otherwise, the practice would be pointless. But it's not pointless. We do have a measure of freedom here in the present moment. There may be some restrictions that come from past karma, but you can learn to work around them. This is a principle that applies across the board in the practice, not just while you're sitting here meditating, but in your activities throughout daily life. You find yourself running up against difficulties that, no matter how skillfully you try to respond to them, are still there. You have the choice of focusing on the difficulties to the point where you can't do anything about them, and get more and more entrapped and frustrated by them. Or if you try to ignore them and pretend they're not there, that doesn't work either. So you've got to find another approach. And fortunately, the best approach is always possible. The present moment is a limited moment, but it does have its openings. It does have its potentials. The wise approach is to admit the limitations, but also to want to explore the potentials for what's skillful. If you have certain responsibilities, learn how to carry them out, but at the same time, you're working on the qualities of the mind. That's what the Buddhist teachings about the paramis, or the perfections, are all about. Even as you go through your everyday responsibilities, you have the opportunity to develop good qualities of mind: patience, persistence, determination, truthfulness. Some of us have a romantic notion about the ideal situation to meditate. You're off by yourself, no responsibilities at all, totally free to meditate all day long. But even in places like that, you find there are limitations, difficulties. And if the meditation is not going well, what do you have to blame it on? Can't blame it on anybody else. It's just yourself. I know a lot of monks who've been out in the forest. They say sometimes they can go for months and months and months with no progress in the meditation. So it's not the case that going off alone and having no responsibilities is going to solve everything. If you do have responsibilities, remind yourself that you don't have to carry them around in the mind all the time. Your outside work is your outside work. Your inside work can always keep going on. Learning patience, learning to have a good humor about the whole thing. A couple years back, we had a problem in the electric room here. The county inspector came and said that it was totally unacceptable. Everything was going to have to be torn out and redone within just a few days. So a couple of the Americans came and worked on it and complained the entire time about how difficult it was, how much they were having to do without sleep, and just on and on and on. And it wasn't helping the job at all. I kept thinking about how things were over in Thailand when we'd have difficulties like that. People there seemed to have a much better humor about things. They seem to have a better understanding of the perfections, that even when things are difficult outside or inside, you've got the opportunity to develop good qualities of mind. Whatever the situation, you want to figure out the skillful way to approach it so that you minimize the difficulties and maximize your potentials for freedom. If you're dealing with more than just present responsibilities, Say, with the results of past mistakes where you've harmed people, the same principle applies. You admit the mistakes. You admit the limitations that they place on you now, but then you try to work around them. Don't let yourself be hemmed in by your past mistakes or be hemmed in by your past karma, because these things don't have to totally shape the present moment. We have some freedom right here, right now, and a lot of the practice is learning how to recognize that fact and maximize it to get the best use out of it. Because all the aspects of the path are possible, whatever the limitations from your past karma are. You can learn how to be generous. You can learn how to be virtuous. You can learn how to develop good qualities of mind. When you've made a mistake, you admit the fact, and you say, I'm going to learn from that. I'm not going to repeat that mistake. And that's as far as you have to go. You don't have to punish yourself. That somehow by feeling really, really sorry, the punishment will go away. That's a dog's way of thinking. It knows it's done something bad. It gets on its back and wags its tail and looks really sorry and hopes that by doing that it's going to appease you. But you're not a dog. You're a human being. As a human being, all you're asked is to recognize the mistake, resolve not repeat it, and then try to develop goodwill for yourself and for everybody else, for the people you've already wronged, for the people you might potentially wrong in the future. Spread goodwill to them, maintain that attitude of goodwill, and you'll be less likely to wrong them. Or even just the fact that you're sitting here in a human body. That has its limitations, but it has its potentials as well. If you're feeling trapped in the body, ask yourself, why are you trapped? Well, you have this perception that it's you or it's yours. You picked up the perception because there were times when it felt useful to identify with the body. It was a means for gaining pleasure. But now you're beginning to realize that identifying with the body has its drawbacks as well. As you get older, illness comes, pains come. Even just the illness of hunger, the Buddha said, is the foremost illness. That's something we all suffer from every day, every day. This is why we have the reflection on the 4 requisites. If we didn't have food, clothing, shelter, and medicine, the body would die. We're born with these gaping needs. But at the same time, you can learn how to use the body as a basis for the practice. You can focus on the breath. As you get more and more sensitive to the breath, you can use the breath as a mirror for the mind. If you get into difficult situations with other people, you'll notice that there will be a change in your breath. What can you do to work with the breath in a way that you're focused not on the difficulties posed by that other person, but on the fact that you can still maintain your evenness of mind regardless of the situation outside? You can use the breath to help you with that. As you work with the breath, you begin to see the power of your perceptions in that the way you conceive of the breath is going to have an influence on how you actually breathe. If you think of the body as a big solid that you've got to push the breath through, it feels like this big lump of fat sitting here and you're trying to force air through the fat. It just doesn't work. It's laborious. It's tiring. But if you perceive the body as an energy field, when you breathe in, it's just more energy joining with the energy already there. It all flows in smoothly, and you don't have to push anything through anything else. It changes the way you breathe, changes the sensation of the breath. As you think of all the different energy channels in the body connecting together, it gets easier and easier for you not to have to breathe at all. The different parts of the body aren't fighting with one another. Your pores feel open. The breath comes in, goes out. Everything feels connected. Everything is charged with breath energy to the point where the breath gets more and more gentle, and finally grows still. A lot of this has to do with the perception you hold in mind. You begin to realize, as the sense of boundary around the body begins to dissolve, that your perception of being in the body was something you've chosen to do. You're not really trapped in the body. You've trapped yourself, but you can free yourself. You can focus on space, around the body, permeating throughout the body, between all the atoms. You can focus on the awareness that encompasses everything. Your sense of what's happening in the body is going to change, and that's just a concentration practice. But the potential for experiencing infinite space or the potential for experiencing infinite consciousness is all right here. You learn how to ferret it out and make the most of it. So this is how we live with our past karma. Accept whatever limitations there are, but also look for the areas that are not limited to see in which direction freedom lies. This means that when you're accepting the situation in the present, it's partly accepting the limitations and learning how to be equanimous about them, but also accepting that there are lots of potentials for freedom here. If you really want true happiness, you try to make the most of those. The Dhamma is not for people who want to be told they just have to accept the way things are, and that'll be totally fine. The Dhamma doesn't stop right there because the present moment is not always a wonderful moment. It can be pretty miserable. Ask the victims of torture, of natural disasters. But even in extremely miserable situations, the same principle holds. You accept your limitations, but you also accept that there are potentials for freedom, potentials for true happiness that can be developed. There's work to be done, but it's good work, regardless of the situation. If you keep that attitude in mind, you can practice the Dhamma and benefit from the Dhamma wherever you are.